Back in June, JMan90 wrote in asking, "So how is the US economy really doing? I look at the Dow and see it sinking to new lows, but I see the dollar hedging up nicely against foreign currency. The GDP is still technically growing about 1%, but are we really in recession? Or are we just kind of stalling out? What needs to happen for everyone to agree that this is a recession?" Whoa, slow down, buddy. Dropping all that econo-techno speak. You're going to confuse the viewers. If you didn't know what he was talking about, we'll get you up to speed. The Dow is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is a price-adjusted index of 30 large stocks usually used as an indicator for trends in the overall stock market and by extension as a proxy for the entire economy. And when he says GDP, he means gross domestic product for the United States, which is the total market value of the goods and services produced by labor and property located within the United States. Not to be confused with GNP, which is the value of all goods and services produced in the economy plus the value of goods and services imported minus the goods and services exported. And the US dollar hedging up nice against foreign currency is of course referring to the relative value of US currency versus foreign currency, which is, by the way, traded just like stocks are. Okay, now that we've got all that straight, we can move on to the simple questions that don't have any really good answers. Everything he mentioned, the Dow, GDP, and currency rates, are indicators of how the economy's doing. There are a bunch more indicators too, like inflation, unemployment, interest rates, housing starts, presidential approval. The bottom line is there are lots of indicators, and no one indicator paints a complete picture of where the economy really is and how it's really doing. But remember, this is macroeconomics. It's like bizarro world. Quantum physics is simple compared to macroeconomics. Actually, they're both really complicated. It doesn't really matter as much how the economy is actually doing as much as what it's expected to do in the future. And it's really complicated. Because it is. Because it includes all sorts of things like my cheapness and the cost of your summer vacation and your friend's addiction to purchasing shoes. Who's buying houses, who's not, who's selling stock, who's not. You see, it's very complicated. So how is the US economy really doing? Hold on. Yep, that's how it's doing. Actually, it's really a subject of debate. All I can say for sure is that it's not doing as well now as it was before. Duh. So how do you define a recession? Well, it depends on who's defining it. Actually, there isn't one fixed definition that everybody uses. But here's a definition that most economists would likely agree with. A recession being defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. In other words, a falling GDP for 6 months. Whereas a depression would be a decline in GDP of 10% or more. And using that definition, we haven't had a depression since 1937. And the largest, the Great Depression from 1929 to 1933, was an estimated 33% drop in GDP. I think it was 33%. Yeah, nearly 33%. It's really close. So are we really in a recession? By the definition I just mentioned, no. Because according to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Statistics, the U.S. GDP went up 0.9% in the first quarter of 2008 and 1.9% in the second quarter. But if you're used to fast-growing, very profitable economic conditions, a significant slowdown feels a lot like a recession. So you're driving along at 80 miles an hour and you hit a traffic jam. You have to slow down to 45. It's a lot like that. I just can't buy all the shoes I want. Oh, that's a real problem, isn't it? What needs to happen for everyone to agree that it's a recession? Well, someone needs to force economists and the media and everyone else to accept a definition of what a recession is. But don't forget that we're still in macroeconomic bizarro world and that the definition will likely be based on a mathematical regression that includes lots of different variables, not just GDP. X plus y minus z times m divided by q makes a funny line that says, hold on. That's what it says. Until then, you'll just get lots of opinions. Like mine. Media people say whatever they want because there's no real definition, so any kind of economic slowdown can be called a recession. Sometimes it doesn't even have to have a negative effect on GDP. But we know how accurate the media can be, don't we?